It is being bold, it is being brilliant, it's being non-apologetic about what we're doing.
You know, we had to leverage those abilities and just to come to the table and execute like never before.
Bring in capable people, coach them, make sure they're connected to the outcome, and let them run.
As a leader and with your team, have to have the will to win.
Connecting more with our humanity and, pausing for a moment to be the human beings that we are.
But with humility, you know that you can leverage that skill set that people have and let them be their best.
This will be a time of innovation.
Hi, and welcome to Courageous Leadership in Times of Global Crisis and Uncertainty, an HMG live virtual briefing covering what matters most to drive a winning agenda and make the future a better place. A warm welcome to today's host, Lead Principal and CEO of HMG Strategy, Hunter Muller.
Good afternoon and welcome. Welcome to the 2020 Minneapolis Virtual CIO Executive Leadership Summit. I'm Hunter Muller, Lead Principal of HMG Strategy. My team and I are delighted to be here with you today. We feel we have a world-class agenda with many of your peers from the greater Minneapolis market here to share their thought leadership and experiencing, leading courageously through a crisis, leading passionately through a crisis, leading authentically through a crisis. So big thanks to our partner, the SIM Minnesota chapter. We're proud to be here with you today and looking forward to seeing you in person in the physical summit in the fall. And please dial into our digital journey. We've spun up some 30 different virtual summits, including webinars and other ways to access the most powerful thought leadership network in our industry. As you can see, various summits next week coming up. We have Atlanta, Silicon Valley, as well as DC, and webinars with Citrix, RingCentral, and Rangeforce. And a big thanks for zooming in today. Let's get on with our program. First up, David Williams, President and CEO of Genesys Works. Genesys Works is a hometown favorite in Minnesota, in Minneapolis. David, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Hunter. It's nice to be on.
Yeah, happy Friday, right? So tell us, what are you doing? What are you doing new and unique in Minneapolis, and a little bit about the Mike McNamara, sorry, with Target, your relationship there.
Yes, well, Mike McNamara, the CIO of Target, is one of our biggest fans. Target this past year took on 55 of our students, and it's just the latest in a long history that we have with Target. Genesys works with high school students. We have an 8-week summer training program that prepares them for a year-long internship during their senior year, where they go to their classes in the morning and have their internship in the afternoon. And it's amazing, since we talked about Target, they now have 14 individuals who are now managers within the Target organization who literally started their career as a Genesys Works intern. And so we're very excited at Target, along with 3M and Cargill and Ecolab and Medtronic and Land O'Lakes. I mean, there are a whole host of Minnesota-based corporations that work with us. In fact, Karen Marbin is our executive director, and she's participating on this conference as well.
Excellent. So a little bit about your pivot post-COVID-19. What are you guys doing differently?
Right. So across the country, we've been able to retain about 80% of our interns in their internship, and they've been working remotely, which has been awesome. That these students that have been able to add value to their corporate partners. Now, the flip side to that is that 20% have not been able to continue, and so we actually have a bench of talented, dynamic, hungry students that have been trained and that have been in an internship for now 7 months and are able to add value. And so we see our students doing all kinds of work in technology and help desk, swapping out hardware, software, project coordination, and then certainly all kinds of things on the business operations side. And so if there are any individuals, any leaders that are looking for some short-term talent and what I would submit long-term talent, then we would love to be able to hear from them. I think in the chat box, we have our impact report that anybody can pull up, or they can reach out to either me or Karen at Genesys Works.
David, thank you so much for coming on the program today. What a great cause. What an amazing career you've had over the years and giving back. A great national partner of HMG. I'm looking forward to seeing you again in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Hunter. Thank you for the time and for the opportunity to speak to your to the great HMG network. Appreciate
Excellent.
it.
Over 100 now on the webinar right now. Thank you, David. Next up, Robin Brown, CIO of Cargill. Robin, welcome to the program today.
Hello,
great to see you.
Thanks for having me, Hunter.
You always look great.
Well, thank you.
Come on, now give us an update, Robin. You've been at Cargill for how long? And the role, the context, and this is a big organization, right?
Yeah, it's pretty huge. Yeah, I've been at Cargill now just a little over 2 years, and I'm the CIO in the Protein North America group. So lots of things going on in our organization and across the company, quite frankly, across the country. So pretty proud to be a part of such an amazing organization like Cargill during times like this.
And the size and scale is pretty large, right? How do you qualify that?
Yeah, over 160,000 employees.
Excellent. Wow.
Yeah.
So what have you learned? You had a few projects in flight and few that you had to dial up real quick, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's lots of key themes and takeaways that we're learning through these times. But what it really all comes down to is leadership is key in shaping the culture during times like this. Our employees, they're watching every move that leaders make, how we respond in these stressful situations, and how we lead through these uncertain times. So one of Cargill's mottos is, we always put people first. So focusing in on their safety and their well-being is completely critical in times like this. And that means we have to change the mindset and how we work and understand that each person may have different circumstances that may impact how they can work differently. So some of the things that we learned through all of this is just being able to move quickly and being nimble made it a lot easier to make decisions, which then enabled our teams very quickly to pivot and work remotely. Using technology in a new and innovative ways kept engagement pretty high with our teams. And our meetings, we've been talking quite a bit that overall, our meetings have probably been more efficient working remotely like this. It's allowed our teams to do what's best for them from a work-life balance perspective. Our employees are using their time very differently in order to fit their work into their personal schedules as well.
Well, it's interesting living in a video digital world.
Yeah.
It requires new management skills. What have you learned about your leadership and management skills in this Zoom world we live in now?
Yeah, it's really interesting when you look at it from that perspective. I think many team members feel like their face-to-face interactions are really important and necessary to continue operating at the highest level of performance. But they found a different way to increase those relationships and partnerships remotely. So our protein executive team, they've actually stated that we've gotten closer with our team members through all of this. Through our virtual meetings, people are getting to know their kids or their pets as they walk into the backgrounds of the video screens, the small chit chat that occurs while we're waiting for people to join meetings. That's enabling us to get to know each other, whether it's from favorite activities, special interests, what food they like to grill. All that wouldn't happen if we were still in the office. But I think the most important thing is that leaders, they're scheduling check-ins with their teams very differently than what they used to. And I know I do this with my team. We don't talk about work on those specific meetings, but we're intentionally seeing how team members are doing and how we can support each other. And I think, the virtual happy hours occur too, but it's overarching a good reminder about our perspective and how we can foster inclusiveness through these hard times while we genuinely check in with each other to see how we're all doing.
Did you notice Snehal's last chart, slicing the pie there? I thought it was really fascinating that empathy is such a huge chunk of the whole equation. And I was talking to Ralph Lohr, global CIO of Lumentum, on our Silicon Valley Advisory Board call yesterday afternoon, Zoom call. And he was talking about how more connected he was with employees worldwide because there's a barrier that's been broken relative to a physical meeting. And do you want to talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, so I'll kind of relate it both from a plant perspective and our corporate employees. So I think when we're looking at our employees, we have to be able to look at the health and safety and making sure that that's always the primary focus. So when we look at our plant teams, I think there was a lot of things that we did during these times. First and foremost, we built temporary structures at the entrances of a lot of our plants to do temperature checks and the typical COVID questions. But we very quickly pivoted to a proof of concept where we installed thermal imaging solutions in our plants to detect if there was any elevated temperatures from people that may not know that they were sick. And so that thermal imaging was a really interesting solution that got installed. So what it did was it scanned a crowd looking for elevated temperatures, and then it sends an automatic notification of those that had elevated temperatures using facial recognition of the impacted employee so that we could ask those employees to go home and take care of themselves while they're sick. And then we're going to have to look at ways we can explore those use cases after COVID-19 is over, to use facial recognition for maybe even punch in, punch out opportunities, label recognition, foreign objects, and hopefully many other opportunities as well. But what was really cool.
Rob, let me get this straight. So actually, literally, you were able to sense inside the plant if somebody was at a high temperature?
Yeah, you put in your criteria and it varies every day. But yes, using that criteria via that thermal technology, it will tell you if there's anybody that has elevated temperatures.
Fascinating.
Yeah, and what was really cool about that, Hunter, is typically that would take us probably multiple months to a year to install something like that. But because of the flexibility and the agility and the partnership with the plants, we did that in less than a week. So that was a pretty cool opportunity to see happen on such a short time frame.
Interesting.
Yeah, a lot of other things happened in the plants. There were plastic barriers that were installed between workstations with social distancing in our plants to keep our employees safe. The typical PPE gear was given. We even went and gave raises and bonuses for our plant employees that are on the front lines because they're the ones facing this every day, and even provided stay-at-home pay for those that have been sick or impacted by COVID-19. So
amazing.
A lot of interesting things for our plant employees.
So where's the silver lining? How are you going to come out of this stronger and thrive and strive?
Yeah. So coming out of this, I think we look back at where we need to put focus and put that priority and make a foundation in everything that we do. It all kind of starts with our lessons learned. So we have learned how to communicate with our customers in a very different way that probably strengthened our relationships. And we need to continue to focus in on those customers with enhanced partnership, transparency, and proactively trying to identify what their needs before they even know what they need. I think analyzing and anticipating our consumer habits will help us innovate differently and leading us to be more resilient, much more faster paced and flexible for our customers. And I think continuing to share information across our company and working in a more collaborative way will absolutely be key moving forward.
Have you noticed a team spirit, Robin, across the company?
Yeah, absolutely. I think everybody's we've really come together in a different way. And, you could say, why weren't we there before? I think sometimes it takes a crisis to really understand how do we step back from what we're doing and really kind of refocus on the things that are most valuable for our customers and how can we help each other through these things. We're still onboarding new employees, and imagine being a new employee coming in during a time like this where you've never actually met your boss face-to-face or your team members. And we're doing it virtually with the tools that we've got in place. And the experience can still feel like it's face-to-face while working remotely with some of these tools that we got. And even in the middle of a crisis, you know, Cargill still believes that we can transform, we can grow, and we can change things that drive the most value for our customers. And in a crisis, you know, like you said before, you have a totally different perspective on how to look at things with a different lens. And, you know, leadership is key. Like we said at the beginning of this interview, you know, leadership is key to shaping the culture during times of crisis. And I feel like our leadership at Cargill is doing a fabulous job of sharing their gratitude for all the work that's been done to keep food in the supply chain. They're keeping employees informed and feeling like we're all part of making a difference. So they're truly leading courageously through this crisis. And that's how Cargill is going to keep nourishing the world in a safe, responsible, and sustainable way.
Robin, it's always great to see you. Love your support, your enthusiasm. Really appreciate it, and appreciate your engagement. Looking forward to seeing you in person, hopefully here in the fall.
I look forward to it as well. Thanks for having me, Hunter.
Thanks for making it. Great. Next up, Dan Flanagan, Chief Strategy Officer of Bremer Bank. Dan, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me this afternoon.
Awesome. Hey, great to meet you as well. So as you approach the current operating environment, and from a strategic point of view, so you're coming at this a little bit from a different lens than a CIO. What are some of the key factors that are drawing your attention now that might be able to help other companies cross industry?
Yeah, I think one thing that's definitely under consideration, you know, having to be stay at home and, you know, the opportunity to watch CNBC now, I think through the entire day, we're seeing some of the struggles in retail. And I think they're all struggles that we're well aware of. And we've seen the impact of customer preferences shifting and changing, the impacts of Amazon and a new delivery model. But what I sort of have been drawing my attention to is sort of now these companies such as Macy's and Neiman Marcus that have now really struggled with the environment from an operating perspective. And so as I've started thinking about it, which led me to looking at our own information, we're seeing digital channel use for us as a financial institution accelerate years. And what I mean by that is, as we look at the channel use and the pace at which customers shifted from maybe using branch versus online or mobile technologies, it's accelerated the pace of acceptance. So it's led to a broader question I think every organization should probably be asking itself is, does that mean that I'm supposed to now accelerate what were my original strategic plans as an organization because of that faster adoption that's probably happening in our different business models as digital's found its way in? And if so, then how should an organization start responding to that? And I bring this up because it's important that in these sort of circumstances we find us in, while we get hunkered down and, you know, we can use lots of metaphors of, you know, fires and things that we're trying to deal with because of these, you know, in the moment elements. We find ourselves, there's also this now longer term maybe impact in our business models, and it's accelerating not by a couple months, but probably by a couple years. And then how are we going to respond as organizations to that customer preference changing?
Let's just hit it right on there. Thank you so much, Dan. It really is all about helping reinvent and reimagine the customer business model supported by a digital technology, right?
Yeah, so what are your digital plans? And I think also, you know, the other element that's important is, you know, the customer's desires to hop channels. So, you know, the convenience of being able to do something digitally, but still being able to reach out and talk to someone when they need help. And making sure that on your delivery to your end customer, hey, can you make that switch and pivot to meet that customer need, you know, and now, right now, and sometimes in times of a very strong need.
Well, it's fascinating because we've been talking about the internet and digital probably for decades, it feels.
Yeah, it's been a big conversation. I think that, but we also always talk about it as, you know, this sort of natural progression that, you know, your customers change and shift, right, their preferences. And we organizationally, sometimes I've heard phrases, well, we don't need to hurry up and do that right now because it's not changing that quickly, or you know, it will only move at a couple percentage points. Therefore, you know, we don't need to be so, you know, redrawing up of the process because we have time. And I think that it's important to just start organizationally thinking about delivery through multi-channels, and then what pace organizationally are you positioning yourself?
Look, right, there are industries that may not make the pivot, right?
Very true.
Yep. And so when you look at the usage of digital technologies for your bank and in the future of banking, what does the future look like for banking?
I think what's pretty interesting is, you know, our organization's been very heavily involved in the PPP program. That's its affectionate Paycheck Protection Program. It gets a lot of discussion right now in the media and in our industry, and we've been actively involved. We've done, you know, in our 3-state footprint, North Dakota, Minnesota, and Wisconsin, we've done roughly $1.3 billion in loans to customers in our community, big and small. And what's been unique about this is that we've had quite a few customers seek us out because they tried through digital-only channels that some offered, and that was the only means. And when you're trying to learn something new as a business owner, you're feeling the stress and the emotions tied up in the environment. Sometimes you need somebody to talk to. And so, you know, we've very strategically positioned ourselves as an organization to obviously try to make things as digital and smooth as we can for customers, but also make sure that we're there and we can talk to them. And so that's been very instrumental for us from a delivery perspective, is to be able to balance not just that digital channel, but also that human touch, because you do at times need to talk to someone.
How were you able to handle the surge of applicants and then the speed in which you got the funds out to the recipients?
Well, we created, I sort of say, a control center, sort of a command group, sort of thinking like a, you know, war room or a draft room, depending on which metaphor you like to use. We drew up the process very simple. And I think that was something we really stressed, was don't overthink it, make it simple. We built the process sort of in functional groups with one main task of delivery. So review, you know, getting the application from the customer being 1, quality control being 2, submission being 3, and so on down the line. That gave us the ability to scale our staff into the spots much quicker, because we could then very quickly get somebody up to speed with what they needed to do in the process. It allowed us to move people around as well, which made it easy for us to address bottlenecks in the process. But ultimately, we kept the process fairly simple, with about 7 steps, from application to money in the customer's account. And that's how we were able to get throughput. We were able to introduce digital channels a little bit later, especially into the second round as that came through. But in that initial wave, there wasn't very strong digital options at that point in time. So we had to quickly innovate in really 48-hour time frame, figure out how to rally the organization around it.
So Dan, Harold Knutson mentioning that he understands the Fed helped matters by insisting on a new TRAN code for the loans. Was that right?
The E-Tran system, I'm assuming that might be where the question is stemming from.
Yep.
So the Treasury group had to figure out a transmission mechanism to try to get the money and in essence the loans approved. So they utilized the infrastructure that was already existent at the SBA. So the E-Tran system was that delivery system. That's caused some, definitely some, heartburn, I think, and some instability issues along the way. And that was mainly because that was a system that wasn't originally designed to handle the throughput that now the country was expecting. But it was one of the few that was in, the government's purview, that they could try to disseminate the funds as quickly as possible to those that were eligible for the program.
Thank you. Excellent. So what's next for you at the bank? What are you thinking next? What's next up?
I think for us, it's going to be sort of evaluating, all right, based upon our forward view of digital and then our shift in customer preferences. The parallel that I can give you is, groceries. Are we going to be more accepting of a culture in which we were okay ordering our groceries online and having them delivered to our homes? or are we going to end up going back to, getting in the car, driving and doing that shopping? And so for us, that business model is going to have to sort of evaluate our customers going to stay in our more convenient digital channels, especially if they're more accustomed to using them. But ultimately, it also tells us from a design perspective that having that human interaction point, especially in stress and times of need, is absolutely critical for your business to be able to allow that for our customers. So we're going to stay with, for us, the current model of making sure that we can have digital capabilities, but allow ourselves to be accessible for people when they need us.
Excellent. Dan, thank you very much for coming on the program. Really appreciate your sharing your insights. Dan Flanagan, Chief Strategy Officer of Bremer Bank. Have a great day. Super. Okay, next up is our leading courageously through a crisis panel of experts. Ann Finch. Ann, you want to say hello? Turn your camera on there, and you're up first.
Hi, I'm Ann Finch, and I am the CEO of Logistics Health Inc., which is a sub-company under the Optum empire, and our company is dedicated to taking care of the military readiness for all branches of the military and servicing our veterans.
Wow, welcome. What a noble cause. Tell us, what have you been doing? What's been keeping you busy over the past 8 weeks?
Well, since we do service all branches of the military, as well as the states, we have been hugely involved in just how can we help the country get all the COVID testing that it needs. So honestly, we're in daily conversations with the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, all the guards, all the states. California, we just stood up 80 sites. Indiana, we just stood up 30 sites. So we really are dedicated to trying to get the country back to work.
Love it. And what strategies have you used most with your staff and team when they're basically stretched pretty thin, right? And hitting a wall?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, focusing on the mission, having a clear sense of purpose and why it matters that we're successful is a great way to ground them. And then I think when you find a team that is just hitting the wall and they're overwhelmed, hear them out, let them tell you what's on their mind, but then help them stop, break the complex things into chunks, manageable chunks, and have them focus just on that next step. If you think about a 500-step staircase, it's so easy to think about it being unaccomplishable and daunting. And if you can get them just to think about what's that next step and take that, have some success and move forward, it really helps. If you think about some of your favorite coaches probably growing up, they inspired you to do more than you ever thought you could do. You looked at that high bar and you're like, I'm never going to get over that. I can't even get on the mat. Yet they incrementally helped you take that next step, build confidence, and continue to grow. That's a big one we've had to use a lot over these last 6 weeks.
That's really well said. How about this, though? Leading in a crisis, you have a lot of people in and around you. You have to keep focused, up, and inspired. How do you take the temperature of an individual or a team? Are they operating from a fear base or from an open base, from a positive base? How do you take that temperature?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you do need to become the master of listening to where people are and how much information they need to get to the next step. Kind of back to the question of like when your kid comes up and says, hey, where do babies come from? Are they really just wanting to know, like, yeah, they come from the mom, or are they really asking for the details? So quickly assessing where people are in their mindset. And I think especially in the time of crisis, listening to the words they use. Are they worried? Do they wish this would go away? It's not fair. I need to blame somebody for where I am. And you find them in a victim mindset. And when you're in a victim mindset, you feel powerless and you're going to spin down. If you could help that person flip the mindset into, let's just accept where we are, but what can you do? What can you do? What part of this can you control? Help them flip to a accountable mindset, which means now I'm back in power. Things aren't just happening to me. I am going to control what I can, and I'm going to take that next step. Whether you're talking to your kids, your neighbors, or your staff, if you can help them get out of that victim mindset of hoping something gets better and focusing on what they can do, everybody can move forward better, including yourself.
And that's an amazing reflective thought of leadership. And then including yourself, how do you get your own self-talk, monitor your own self-talk so you're neutral, open, and leaning forward courageously? How do you do that?
You know, I think it's recognizing when your battery needs to get recharged, like suddenly you start feeling yourself kind of going down into that victim mindset yourself. And sometimes it's just stopping, walking outside, going around the block for 5 minutes, or really flipping to being grateful. Like in the moment, I may be starting to have a pity party, but then I have to realize, wow, what am I grateful for? I have a great team. I have a great support network. It's nice outside and it's not snowing. Like, what are the things you can be grateful in that moment and just help pull yourself out of that and get you back into that positive energy mode?
I love that, Ann. The gratitude list always seems to work, right? And making sure that you have the right kind of rest, exercise, nutrition, drinking enough water, right? A real holistic point of view.
And a bucket of cookie dough doesn't hurt.
There you go. I love it. Stay with us. We'll be back to you in just a minute. Marc Carlson, CIO of Land O'Lakes. Marc, welcome to the program.
Well, thanks for having me. Appreciate being on.
Oh, it's great to see you. Hey, a big fan of your company, big fan of your products. Tell us what's shifted for you in the past 8 weeks.
You know, trying to figure out how to do this job with 5 kids at home. Growing a really ugly beard is another one. But, you know, I think as Ann said, it's really, you know, trying to keep the mentality of your workforce who is really tired right now, you know, going forward and positive. I think, you know, everyone had the adrenaline up front. This is going to be, you know, a few weeks to a month. Let's, you know, make sure everyone else can be, you know, as efficient, as effective as they can. And I think that adrenaline rush is gone. People are now tired and fatigued. They've been running hard. Now it's more of, you know, how do we keep them productive, but also, as Ann said, how do we keep them thinking about their own health and their own mentality? So it's been a big talk, you know, within our executive leadership team. Every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we get together to start today. And today's conversation was on mental health of not only our employees, but our members, because we're a co-op, so all of our farmer members and et cetera. It's a very trying time for them, you know, across the various industries. So really it's, you know, we're kind of transitioning into, this is going to be a longer term thing. It's a different way of work. And, you know, how do we make sure our employees stay, you know, healthy and productive?
I like the way you framed that up, Marc. We were on a call with Jerry Martin Flickinger from Starbucks the other day, and she said, look, Hunter, this is a marathon. This is going to be a long road here. How do you pace yourself, right? And then Jim Swanson of J&J said, you know, lead with humility and lead with gratitude and, you know, an open heart. Right? Just be really dialed into your people that are around you.
Absolutely. And I think it's, you know, as you said, it's, we went out with a sprinter's mentality, right? We're going to get this, we're going to be back to work. We are technically an essential business, so we could have people in the office, but, you know, we're really focused on their safety and well-being. And, you know, the only way we're going to get them back in, even, you know, in the longer term is, you know, are they going to be more effective? You know, are the fear factors down for people? Can they work in the environment? Because, you know, going back to work is not going to be the same. You're going to wear a mask. You're likely still going to be on conference calls. You know, we've already set up our office and trial periods. We're going to have one-way streets and zones that people live in. That's not the office you used to have. And it's not, you know, unfortunately, something people think about when they're going back is it's going to be a very different process and feeling, getting temperature checks when you walk in the door, having to have a mask, and making sure, you know, that you're taking care of yourself. It's a different mindset, and it's something that will be a challenge as we start to send people back in the office.
Oh, interesting. What about the supply chain? Is the supply chain okay? We're always worried about the supply chain, and reassure us that we're not going to run out of stuff, please.
Yeah, I think you saw the initial blips up front, right, where the hoarding mentality and other things happen. You know, the toilet paper phenomenon was amazing to me. I still don't get that one, but there's some psychological side. But yeah, I think the supply chain is in good shape. You know, I think you're starting to see stores get back to normal levels. I think the challenge, and we had this discussion this morning as a leadership team, is agility in the supply chain. We're used to, you know, setting it up, refilling, restocking, maybe some outages based on some, you know, freakish spikes in demand. But, you know, how quickly can we change over when products are not as needed? We're seeing that in our animal feed space, that, you know, customers are buying different products, and how quickly can we change over? So that's our, our big challenge. I think the benefit of the crisis is it's really forcing us to think differently and become more agile as an organization.
Are you thinking differently about your strategic plans going forward?
100%. So we're in a complete replan mode, because I think just the uncertainty of the moment, right? So how long are we going to be doing this? How will the economy come back online? What is the impact in one of our businesses, our dairy foods, which, our butter space. We have a large percent that is, education, food for educational facilities, healthcare, food service. That's taken a dramatic hit, obviously. And now what does that look like as we come back online? Will it be back? Will will restaurants come back? It's a big question. And as I think Ann mentioned too, what does it look like? What does shopping behavior and other things look like in the future?
Excellent. Thanks, Marc. Stay with us. On to Tarek Tomes. Tarek, welcome to the program. Thanks for making it.
Hi, how are you?
Excellent.
Pleasure to be here.
CIO of state of Minnesota. I guess most of the folks on the line know you. You're probably a rock star in town.
I don't know about being a rock star in town. It certainly is an interesting time to be in state government. I'm a member of Governor Walz's cabinet. And in addition to kind of the day job of managing an IT organization, I have a lot of additional duties related to a lot of the topics, and I can certainly sympathize and empathize with so many of the comments that I've heard, and I think they're spot on. By way of our organization, Minnesota IT Services is a organization. There are 2,400 technologists in my organization, and we support 2,800 line of business applications, about 40,000 state employees, and manage a statewide network. And as of late, and I mean this in the most affectionate way possible, it feels that every time the governor talks, a lot of different dials start to spike and a lot of different things start to move. It was interesting to see, just a couple of metrics. State government sent about 7.2 million emails in March. We sent about 5.5 million emails in March of 2019. We have about 4 million hits on our website, mn.gov. We've supported over 500,000 unemployment insurance requests and have supported Minnesotans by paying out almost $2 billion in really critical funding to help Minnesotans pay for critical needs. The way, we kind of look at our work is our work is, and I think this is true for many of the folks that have talked, I categorize it in kind of three buckets. One is, how do we continue to deliver the services that people require and people rely on in this new world? We have 60+% of our workforce that's working remotely. About 90% of my staff, the 2,400 technologists, works remotely. And how do we continue to support state services in this new world? The other is, how do we meet new needs of Minnesotans during this COVID-19 crisis, the unprecedented unemployment insurance claims, and many of the new types of things that are coming about just related to Minnesotans' needs. And then the last bucket, and this is one that has been just such an inspiring journey together with so many technologists, both in the private sector and the public sector, is what role does technology play in changing outcomes? What role can technology play related to contact tracing, both from a public health perspective or consumer contact tracing, or the IoT innovations to count capacity within workspaces or check temperatures? Just what role can technology play in changing outcomes and letting us live in as best a new normal as possible?
Any thoughts on when we get back to work and what that looks like?
That's a good question. We talk about it on a daily basis. I had meetings about that before this meeting. I'll have more after this meeting. In Minnesota, the governor really is focused on kind of three broad dials that we look at. We look at a business dial, we look at a social dial, and we look at this educational dial, and we really look at everything from a health-based perspective and really a balanced perspective, and looking at an organization's opportunity to resume some type of activity with really an idea of what are the most predictable settings that we can create, and really moving that dial towards the least type of predictable settings. And I think certainly the goal of resuming economic activity is really, really important. In Minnesota, I think we've been somewhat fortunate, but certainly unfortunate as well. 80% of the businesses in Minnesota have been operating in some way. And when we opened retail for curbside business, I think that moved it to about 90%. But the impact in Minnesota, as it is across the country, is absolutely enormous.
Thank you so much, Tarek. Appreciate it. Thanks for coming on the program. We'll be back to you in just a minute. Kathryn, come on the program. Kathryn Freytag, CIO of Donaldson Company. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me, Hunter. Nice to be with you guys and getting some other people to talk to other than my dog and myself.
Great to see you. Great to see you. Look great. Hey, what's new with you over the past 8 weeks? What have you been working through, and what's your focus on as we get ready to go back to work physically or maybe metaphorically? Sure. What does that look like?
Yeah, so first, I'd like to address that this has gone on for Donaldson for more than 8 weeks. We were on the front end of the COVID crisis as the breakout hit China, and we have a large portion of our business that's done manufacturing, sales, distribution out of China. So I started this journey early days, right after the new year, and it's just continued to follow the globe and is now, you know, the ramp up and peak here in the US. So we've been pivoting our focus and our attention to supporting the business in their need to move from work from home in an environment where we have a very manufacturing-based approach to business, that you can't make widgets from home, right? Where manufacturing mindset. And so there was a lot of pivoting from a leadership perspective. Not only how do you enable the office workers to work from home, but how do you ensure productivity and effectiveness and collaboration and communication, et cetera. So we've been battling this for the better part of 5 months now. So
yeah, I heard some good news out of China this morning that Disney's opening up their theme park, and they sold out in a matter of hours for the first month.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. The thing, you know, that, and I've heard it a little bit throughout around the mental health issue, and, you know, folks having to stay in place, limit contact with outside folks, not getting to do the things that you would normally do from a social perspective. You know, I think that that's going to have some rippling effects around the globe, and it'll be interesting to see. I know that our organization has put together some great programs with employee assistance and leading through change, and you know, just some programs to help people deal with those challenges. So we've been dealing with it for a while. You know, I'm so proud of my team who really stood up and knocked it out of the park, and we didn't miss a beat. And we had global collaboration to facilitate distribution of laptops and headsets and cell phones to folks who normally might not have access to those technologies. We have 14,000 employees around the globe. So, you know, we really had to pivot ourselves pretty quickly. And my team just took it in stride. You know, I can't tell you how proud I am and how grateful our business has been that we were in a position to really help facilitate that without missing a beat. You know, what some of the challenges we faced, or what some of the outcomes and learnings that we've had thus far. This BYOT scenario where we find entrepreneurial individuals bringing their own technology to the table, and having to walk that line and balance the individual's need to be productive and use technologies that are easily available for them to use, while maintaining some sense of standard capabilities so that, we don't have the wild, wild west. So that's been an interesting challenge for us. And again, where it's pushing the boundaries of the IT innovation and technology deployment pace for us. So we've really had to shift our focus where collaboration technology may have been more, it more happens to us. This really made us stand up and take notice of, we really need a very strong plan of attack on how we're going to enable this type of global collaboration, both internal and external, where our sales and our service organizations, which are typically face-to-face engagements, we're now having to think collaboratively and support the business on how can they enable sales people to sell in the virtual world. And are our collaboration platforms and our sales and our customer engagement platforms enabled and capable of keeping that pace? The other piece is, the supply chain. That was a big opportunity for us as well. Making sure that our supply chain had the right data, had the right tools to make actionable, good decisions to keep that supply chain moving. Where are our products? What are the hot spots? What's happening with our suppliers? So not only did we need to track and measure and monitor the demand from our customers as they were shutting down or they needed to reduce the demand, but also, looking at our supply chain and ensuring that we understood the hot spots in the supply chain, and facilitate discussions with our supply chain, because we were considered critical, essential business. And how do we then, by extension, extend our suppliers to be considered essential? So just working through all of that data and working through all of that, the information, sorting through all that so that we could be effective. And ensuring that we could still maintain strong support, a strong support model. So as you have people now who are at home and you have very little control over the last mile of technology, how do you now 1,400 people who have last mile technology that you have no control over and help them manage and walk through potential issues with their service provider or their laptops or any number of different technology road bumps that they encounter during the day. So it's been an interesting journey. It's highlighted some opportunities for us in ways that we can continue to grow and mature with the end goal of continuing to drive business results.
Excellent, Kathryn. Thank you so much for that update. Appreciate it. Stay with us, please. Next up, Tim Peterson, Senior Vice President and CIO of Xcel Energy. Tim, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you, Hunter. Privileged to be here and appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, excited to have you here and great to meet you the other day through the network. Hey, what is the silver lining? What are the key, big opportunities or benefits out of this crazy global pandemic that we're probably in the first inning of?
Yeah, I'd start off by just acknowledging, and I think we've talked about it on this call, frankly, the significance of the tragic situation we're in. It's a very personal crisis. To think about silver linings, it may be a little bit difficult, but I think as many of us have discussed, I think we're all looking for ways to make ourselves, our teams, our companies, our communities better. I think, a few of the ones we've talked about, certainly the speed of decision-making for me is something I've been thinking a lot about. It's just, I think we were probably forced into that a little bit when we kind of had to pivot, like a lot of people have talked about on this call, to kind of quickly move to work from home. But also, I think just you don't have time to kind of, I think maybe tolerate some of the red tape or bureaucracy. I think a lot of our companies have, certainly large companies will have a certain degree of it. So I think the speed of decision making has been a big one. And then the obvious move towards digital. And I think it goes beyond just the table stakes, but certainly, you know, work from home capability is indeed table stakes, and making sure that stuff doesn't fall down, but building capabilities that I think will help our organizations emerge out of this situation that we're in, and frankly sustain, I'm guessing, a lot of efficiency measures that many of us are putting in place. How do you make sure you're investing in the assets that help us kind of sustain and keep those savings kind of, you know, endure as we go forward? And then I think the last, and again, I think a number of panelists have touched on this already, is you know, this focus on continuous improvement. And it really goes beyond just kind of, you know, sheer cost cuts or savings, but how do you really try to use this opportunity to help make your organizations more efficient, take that kind of motivation. I'm sure many companies have had that in their DNA and their culture, but certainly our economic situation that we're in is pushing that more. And you know, maybe to use an overused analogy, I think diamonds are created under pressure. So I think you know, I think there's an opportunity to really come out of this stronger, but making sure that we're kind of thinking beyond just sheer efficiency measures, but what assets will help us kind of sustain those kind of changes that we're making in our business going forward. But I'll pause there.
Tim, how are you thinking about measuring productivity and increased productivity and innovation?
Yeah, I've been, you know, getting that question a fair amount, certainly as you transition a number of resources to work remotely. And I think the key is to not focus on activity or kind of the standard input metrics. I think it's pretty tempting to want to know, all right, how many people are logging into VPN, how many people are actually working, if that's kind of their indicator. And I think the reality is those activity metrics are not a good indicator of productivity. Just because people are busy doesn't mean they're more productive. And I think now more than ever is just really focusing on a lot of the, you know, strengthening the performance management process and emphasizing the outcomes. That I think is key. So do people have goals? You know, are you regularly reviewing them? How are you helping, you know, celebrate as milestones are achieved? If there's been failures, you know, how do you learn from them? All the things I think we've been focused on before, but not necessarily falling into that trap of thinking about, all right, you know, how many people are logging into VPN? How many emails are being sent? How many meetings are people attending? But, you know, really putting that energy more towards strengthening the performance management process.
Excellent. Thanks, Tim. When you think about your leadership style, how would you characterize your leadership style?
Yeah, I think for me, it's being patient. It's definitely making sure, as again, many panelists have referenced, recognizing that people are going through a tremendously stressful time and everybody reacts differently to it. You know, there's a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety out there, and really trying to maintain that connection with staff in a remote fashion. Again, a lot of people have talked about. So I've really been focused on that. I think the other aspect is just, again, as accomplishments, as wins come, how do you help celebrate those wins and give the recognition, whether it's kind of virtual sessions where you're just kind of not talking about work, but trying to help celebrate a victory or a big milestone within a program. But I think it's balancing that human side of things with the desire and the drive to, you know, certainly execute on the strategy and the projects and you know, obviously deliver value back to the company, but trying to make sure you recognize the sensitive situation that we're all in.
Tim, thanks so much for coming on the program. So that's a wrap on our panel. Really appreciate all our panelists' engagement. Thank you very much, Ann, Kathryn, Tarek, and Tim, and Marc. Great job.
Thank you.
Next up, our search executive industry update. Harold Knutson. Harold and your team of search execs, welcome. Harold, take it away.
Thanks, Hunter. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Harold Knutson, semi-retired CIO and president of the SIM Minnesota chapter, where our mission is advancing the practice of IT leadership in Minnesota. I'm really pleased to collaborate with Hunter and HMG on today's session. Just to keep us from falling too much farther behind, I'm going to zip through some of this stuff pretty quick. But the good news is we've got 3 renowned executives with us today to talk about the state of the search industry. So I'm going to introduce each and then offer them a question that I think most of you would be interested in, and then we'll follow up with some others. First up is Renee Frey, recruiting expert, speaker, and author. She founded TalentQ in Hudson, Wisconsin. She has nearly 2 decades in recruiting experience in search firms. She's also the author of I Hate Mondays, a guide to landing a job that makes you jump out of bed. She's sought out by industry leaders to speak and educate on topics related to recruiting and the complexities of today's employment market. And allegedly, she has enough energy to blow the roof off any room. And so with that, I'd like to ask Renee to fire off our session here by addressing the question of late during the pandemic. What are the circumstances that cause firms to actively seek to fill a senior IT leadership role? What helps them decide whether to actually act on it now during this or wait and see?
Yeah, thanks, Harold. Thanks for having me. Hi, everybody. I really think companies who have had a strategic plan in place to change executive leadership are still moving forward with those plans. Those searches haven't been put on hold. One company that we're working with on an IT director search, when all of this started, we were in discussions in March, and then they just merely pushed it back a month. So instead of wanting to see the first slate of candidates in May, they pushed it back to June. So we're seeing a little bit of a delay there because the person in place actually is involved with making sure their teams have the capability to work remotely. But they're still moving forward with that search.
Excellent. Thank you, Renee. Second up, Renee, if you just hang on, we'll cycle back here too. Next up is Jamey Cummings. Jamey is a senior client partner and core member of Korn Ferry's technology officers practice. He also co-leads the firm's global security practice. He's based in the firm's Dallas office, happens to be a Minnesotan by native growth, out of Mankato, and remains a loyal Twins and Vikings fan, which means he's used to having his heart broken. So he can join the rest of us. Much of his search work is in fact done here in the Midwest. Really interesting thing is that before he joined Korn Ferry about 8 years ago, he used to be with Boston Consulting Group in Dallas, had a summer internship with Target in Minneapolis. But earlier than that, he served 9 years as an officer in the US Navy SEALs team. I really want to thank him for that service. Korn Ferry also recently posted a really great article you could go look at called How to Job Hunt During a Pandemic. But the question I've asked Jamey to kind of start off with is, I happen to believe that it's true that a crisis reveals leaders more than it creates them. And so I'm wondering how he feels about the role CIOs have played in getting their companies functioning from home. And will it affect their position in the executive team and how they relate to others?
Thanks, Harold. And I would, thanks for the thank you there, by the way. Yeah, I think I would agree with you that the tough times reveal character and reveal leaders. That's when you really see who will shine and who won't. My view is even within our own firm, it just so happens our new CIO, he's 6 months into the job, about 2 months in, he has taken on a lead role in disaster recovery. So within our firm, I think a lot ahead of time, if you ask most people, who would be the leader in the organization that's front and center when it comes to handling a crisis and communicating what we're going to do and how we're going to do it? Not just technology, but just as an organization. I don't think a lot of people would have said the CIO, but Brandon has been very much front and center along with our CIO and our our CEO and President of North America. And not only just some of the basic blocking and tackling that some of the other panelists have talked about, just being able to enable people to work remotely, especially if it's not something they planned on at this sheer magnitude. But this theme of leadership and how do you inspire others and keep them motivated when the novelty of working home, if there ever was any, quite frankly, is worn off. And I think I personally believe that coming out of this, organizations are going to look more closely at their technology leaders, and some of them are going to realize, wow, I think we underappreciated him or her and what they bring to the table. And there's going to be some where they're going to say, you know, I don't think we were quite ready and we didn't respond very well in a crisis. We need to think about this going forward and either coach that person or they may need to upgrade. So I do think there's going to be opportunities, and it's just going to reinforce that technology leaders should be front and center, not just back office, if you will, which I think we all have known for a long time, but I think it's going to be more obvious to more people. That's just my view.
Yeah, it just is kind of catalyzing that role. Thank you, Jamey.
Sure.
And I again will apologize for talking so fast, but I am trying to keep an eye on time. I want to make sure everybody gets out of here on time. Isaac Cheifetz is our third panelist. He's the managing principal of Catalytic1, retained search firm focused on technology leadership roles. He also writes a bi-weekly column for the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, which I've enjoyed a number of. Most recent one is focused effort needed to gain economic foothold on China, not in China, but on China. He's discussed U.S. engineering needs for a Manhattan-like or Apollo-like project. Fascinating little read. But one of the things I wanted to ask Jamey is, okay, I've been working along and all of a sudden, OMG, my job's been eliminated during the pandemic. Should I just go down to the hospital and volunteer without PPE, or is there hope for me?
I think there's hope. We actually had a couple of the early panelists say some things I thought were really relevant. When Ann Finch said that avoiding a victim's mentality is critical, and when Marc Carlson talked about it being a marathon, not a sprint, and Hunter did as well. I mean, let's face it, this is still an information-based economy. It's becoming more of an information-based economy. And so any of us are on the right side of the divide in terms of where the economy is going. Now, that's not to say that some verticals aren't going to be better off than others. I would imagine that someone in supply chain or healthcare is going to have an easier time of it than someone in travel or hospitality, assuming they're staying in that vertical. I also would think that that 6-month rule, to whatever extent that notion that it takes 6 months to find an executive job is still a current number, that you'd have to add a couple of months to that. But the good news is the work that we do is critical to society and the economy. And I think people who just put the energy into information networking and into adding value will do fine.
Excellent. One quick question for any of you before we run out here is, how has the pandemic and the work from home changed the recruiting process? The people who are out searching or interviewing, can you offer them any pointers on how to make interviewing via video more successful?
I can speak to that.
Isaac,
go ahead. I can speak to that from having just completed a couple of searches that were virtual. It's not that different. I mean, you're still doing pretty much the same things. You're simply relying more on, maybe you have to do your homework, not rely on that face-to-face gut feel that people rely on sometimes too much. But I think probably all of us search professionals would say that your gut feel isn't such a great thing to go by anyways, as opposed to going by a more fact-based basis as to what someone's done and what they're about.
Jamey?
Yeah, well, I think that, I'll use a football analogy. I'm hopeful that we'll actually see football here in the not too distant future, is that we were already able to get things to the 20-yard line this way anyway. It compressed the timeline and cost, quite frankly. It's the red zone of getting across the finish line, the goal line, that's been a little bit tougher. I've heard of a few colleagues who've actually had completely 100% virtual searches completed. I still think that would be a little bit of the exception than the rule, but it's possible. But I would agree with Isaac. It's not that drastically different. I found most people will wear a suit and tie and they'll be ready to go, and you're just doing it through a different media. But we've already been a medium, and we've been doing it a lot already anyway, just from an efficiency perspective. And my experience has been relatively seamless so far.
Cool. Renee, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I would just add that keep in mind some people are really adaptable to this, and others might need to meet more people of the team, or might want to see a video of your organization internally and things of that nature. So we've seen clients get really creative with that, and a lot of them have great information on their websites, so people can do their research on Google as well. But some of the individuals who are switching careers during this time just might want a little comfort level and meet more people at your organization. So just give people grace.
Excellent, thank you. So I'd like to thank all the panelists. And what I heard is there's encouraging news. People are still searching to fill positions. In fact, the CIO role is maybe even becoming more important in organizations. So there's hope. Thank you very much. I'm going to now turn it over to Bryce Austin, my colleague, who's going to chair the Security Council.
Thank you, Harold.
Excellent. Sounds great. Let me get some audio going and some video going. Can everyone hear and see me okay? Well, I guess you guys are on mute, so how would you know? Fair enough. Paul, Pat, great to see both of you. It's been a while since we've connected in person, and I want to say this is the first time that I've had to wear a collared shirt here since March, so you're making me dress up for you guys. You're that important to me. All right, let's get this going. For those who don't know, I don't have a long introduction, but Pat, Joyce, you've known each other for many years. You have been the CISO for Medtronic for, I think, back before they were using metronomes for pacemakers, right?
Close to that, right.
There you
exactly.
go. And Paul, you are a more recent transplant to Palo Alto, but before that, you had a number of CISO roles and also helped develop a number of the cybersecurity frameworks that we're currently using.
Yep, correct.
Fantastic. All right. I'll pitch it over to you. We're in the middle of COVID. The cyber criminals don't care. They see this as an opportunity. What are you guys seeing as the single greatest challenge from a cybersecurity perspective that the industry and your companies are facing in this new COVID world?
I'll take the first stab at it. You know, we're just, as you guys know, we're very global in terms of our footprint. We're spread across the world, 94,000 employees. Similar to some of the other comments, we still have to manufacture. We still have to get those life-saving therapies in the hands of physicians and patients. So we have to be very conscious of that. So we have to keep that enterprise running. Being able to make that shift, though, to take 30, 40, 50,000 of those 94,000 people and have them work from a remote setting is daunting to begin with. But to do that where we basically put them out in the wild, so to speak, from a cyber standpoint, they're not behind some protective layers, whether it be Palo Alto or other systems, making sure that we planned ahead for this eventuality. And in some cases we did, because we've been driving toward remote work for a long time and doing that in a secure way. But the criminals, like you said, are still going to find a way. If they can't get in this way, they'll try to get in that way. And so it really hasn't changed the game for us that much, other than the fact that we're all doing it remotely.
Fair enough. Okay.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective, I kind of have two hats. One is just, you know, internally what the Palo Alto cybersecurity program is doing, and then I'll just kind of share a little bit about some of the big accounts where I'm the executive sponsor, you know, the Fortune 500 companies. And so within Palo, I'd say the biggest challenge has been learning where to make compromises in the security program with the objective of business continuity, right? So as an example, how do we balance kind of like what Pat said, this idea of having this traditional security program that might be protected by an enterprise network, and you've now, you know, got a workforce that's entirely remote, including developers. And I would say the biggest challenge is making those compromises to make sure that business can move forward. And then ultimately, I think the question becomes, is that the new norm, and will we ever get back to, you know, those compromises being you know, back to, do they become a permanent setting because everyone's comfortable with it, things like that. And then from a industry lens, not very different. I think the biggest concerns that I'm seeing, you know, as far as challenges within the CISO world is taking on new regulations. You know, some industries were focused on maybe manufacturing, for example, and now their digital comm sites are where all the revenue's coming from as the plants and as the physical world is, you know, temporarily shut down. So they're dealing with PCI all of a sudden, and now with, you know, body thermal scanners and, you know, contact tracing. You've got HIPAA and privacy rules, you know. So again, Patrick's definitely, you know, equipped to handle that, but a manufacturing company or you know, a non-healthcare company also dealing with healthcare regulations. I think it's, you know, for the industry, that's a big challenge of resilience, right? How do you manage this quickly revolving landscape?
Fair enough. Very good point. I'm seeing shifts with my clients that some of which surprised me and some didn't. Things that didn't we're not expecting all these people to be at home, and some of the logistics of doing that is hard. A lot of people have VPNs. If you didn't, well, you're way behind. But a lot of people have VPNs set up to split tunnel, which means that your Palos are ignorant of the data that they're exfiltrating, not through the VPN. And I'm working an active breach right now where that's been a real hindrance. And we just don't have the bandwidth, and we don't have big enough firewalls to handle it. So without really good endpoint protection, it used to be before COVID, people in the office, yeah, you need something on there, but I wasn't a huge fan of these next generation endpoint protections. Well, I certainly am now.
Yeah, we very similar to what you're saying is we made some shifts to those, some pretty significant shifts to be able to do crowdsourced type solutions, whether it be email, web filtering, and now the EDR, the endpoint detection response type stuff. That is, to me, has been a game changer for being able to protect, as you said, in a split tunnel world, our users, our data, our interfaces with our customers, all of those things is more secure as a result. And of course, we didn't do it because we thought COVID was coming. We did it because as an enterprise, we are doing more and more remote work. And I think in the end, the new normal is going to be that sine wave as we go through the next few months and hopefully not much longer than that, of not knowing if we have a vaccine, et cetera, and testing scenarios. We're going to have people in and out of offices. We're going to have them in and out of those settings. And I'm not sure, aside from our manufacturing and maybe our R&D type people who are in labs, we're not going to probably have a heavy push to put people back in offices. So we're going to have to learn how to live in this space for a while.
I agree. I agree. One of the things that I didn't see coming was the shift from large institutions being targeted by cyber criminals in general to the heavy push for individuals. We're seeing numbers of 300 to 400% increases in phishing towards individuals. Not that they're ignoring big companies, but I wasn't expecting that. And I also wasn't expecting that a number of companies that are making COVID tests, that are hospitals, what have you. I have a biotech client that does COVID testing, and we're under very much increased attack for the departments that handle that, which just stunned me. I feel like I'm in a Batman movie where the Joker wants to just watch the world burn. Are you guys seeing a change in the attack landscape?
Well, we're one of the larger manufacturers, always have been, of ventilators. We gave the IP away so that others could do it here a month and a half ago. We did see a spike in some activity. Everyone has seen a spike in COVID-related activity, but you see more and more attacks coming back at your organization, and don't know if that's tied because we're more in the news or not, but it certainly would be not be a surprise to have a criminal activity do some research and change their targeting profiles.
Yeah, there's been an absolute increase in targets towards individuals, executives, and as Pat said, kind of high-profile organizations that are really trying to create stability in a world of instability. So I think they become targets because they become, the good guys per se, in this current situation. So a lot of customers that we're, interacting with right now, they're seeing a trend where I wouldn't say there's a significant new type of risk when it comes to our current state, but I would say you've gone from organizations that might have 10 to 20%, remote workforce capability to 100% in some cases. And that is a shift of culture that a lot of organizations just aren't prepared for, right? There's a lot of employees who are kind of comfortable being inside the castle and the moat and just don't know necessarily good hygiene. So I think there's just generally a higher propensity of success for the adversary. And then I think most importantly, the executives of all these companies, right, become targets and their homes become targets. So we're also seeing the home becoming kind of a new network, a new corporate, target, if you will. And a lot of IoT devices and a lot of personal networks are now becoming targets. And a couple of CISOs I was talking to the last couple of weeks, they're faced with this challenge. They're saying, these networks aren't ours. These assets are not under our management. There's only so much we can tell these employees to do with their house, right? And so they're balancing the idea of awareness with, I think, operational standards that just don't necessarily transcend into, I don't want my company telling me how to, manage my Siri, for example, or whatnot. And so I think that becomes a challenge for myself and for CISOs.
So you're saying that password on my Wi-Fi of TCE Strategy is a problem? Is that what I'm hearing from you? I better change that quick.
It may be, but at least you have a password on that Wi-Fi.
Right, exactly.
So we are seeing a shift into the homes, into users that are needing to take care of things that they used to expect their company to take care of. I'd love to hear how you're both addressing education of the end users, of the executives that manage those end users. How are you managing a budget around the need to try to educate these people in this time of economic crisis?
You want to go, Paul, or do you want me to take it?
No, go ahead, Pat.
All right. We've always heavily focused on the training aspect of it. We have a good team that does that. We've absolutely shifted our focus in that training toward the hygiene of our employees in their home work environment, right? And I actually focus it not just on their behavior, but here's things you can teach your kids. Here's websites you can go to that your kids can learn about cybersecurity. So getting it kind of ingrained in the culture of the family, in addition to the culture of the workplace, which we've always focused on. Budgetarily, we're applying the right resources to do that, so we make sure that we're covering off on it. Because you're right, it's a different world, but we're coming at it from the standpoint of, if you feel like you're going to gain something at home, you'll bring those behaviors back into the workplace.
Yeah, very similar to Pat, Bryce. We've got a program that's been always active around, awareness. I'd say we have the advantage of being, the largest cybersecurity company. So a lot of people, employee, kind of understand security. So my job's a lot easier than Pat's. But what we've done from a CEO on down is we've made it, as far as making sure employees could have the right assets and making sure they can have the right technology and bandwidth and availability. Ultimately, we want visibility and to enforce an always-on VPN, regardless of where they are. But we've needed to be able to accelerate the way assets have been distributed and getting a little bit more colorful on how home offices are being procured. So right now, a lot of our employees have the ability to just go and get whatever they need. Of course, we have Best Buy. I used to work there, and they're headquartered here in Minneapolis. So our employees now have the ability to go into that Best Buy, get what they need, as far as assets, and that helps the security posture because we want to make sure that they're up to date, they have the right hardware, they have the right bandwidth, so that we can ultimately enforce more overhead from a security perspective. Because we're adding encryption, we're adding things to these things. So that's a balance between availability and security, right? And so we want to eliminate any variables. Like I can't afford, a bigger bandwidth pipe, or I can't afford, a strong router at home. We've eliminated that from an employee perspective.
Good for you. Well, hey, I want to be respectful of people's time on the call and want to thank Paul and Pat for their contributions and insights. This is the 75th anniversary of Victory in Europe Day in World War II. And one of the many ways that victory came about were through victory gardens. It was through people learning to grow their own food and be part of their own ecosystem. Now, we're not yet having any serious food shortages, just hoarding, but we now have an ecosystem of technology that is including the home, that is including our users. And I look forward to the change that we're going to see in the increased need for this education, for this understanding that we're all part of the cybersecurity solution together. Thank you both to the panelists. Hunter, over to you.
Excellent, Bryce. Thank you. Great job. Wow, what a great day. Great summit. Hopefully you all enjoyed it. Looking forward to being there with you in person in the fall. Thanks for staying engaged, and let's do this again soon. Take care and be safe.